But it didn't start with a confrontation. It started with a key. Liana turned it once. Twice. The lock did not move. Then she saw them. Church elders watching from her porch like sentinels. They didn't yell. They didn't threaten. They simply claimed her home as if grief had made her invisible. Police called it a civil matter. So she slept in her car with her daughter and recorded a single trembling video. What she didn't know was that her husband had once saved a man who didn't forget debts, and that man had an army, one that didn't raise voices or weapons, just presence. What happens next changes everything. If this story matters to you, subscribe and share. They said it was a civil matter. A widow on a lawn, a child clutching a threadbare lamb, and a line of men in black suits holding hymn books where her roses used to be. The law shrugged. The faithful smiled. That's how a home disappears at noon. Liana Arquette felt the key resist, then refuse. She tried again, slower, as if gentleness could persuade brass. It didn't. The red door she and Tarek had painted together regarded her like a stranger. Beside her, Ada tugged the hem of her black dress. "Mom, why are church people in our yard?" the girl whispered. Sister Helene Ward stepped onto the porch with a porcelain smile. Two narrow-tied men flanked her, Bibles cradled like deeds. "Liana," Helene said, soft, almost pitying, "we're so sorry for your loss." Tarek made a vow to the ministry. He gave this house to the church last month. We're honoring his promise. He would never sign away our home, Liana answered. She lifted the key ring with the tiny brass sun Ada had glued to the fob. "My name is on the deed." More faces appeared in the hallway behind Helene. One man held a folder with a notary stamp. The first patrol car slid to the curb with its lights dim. Officer Delaney asked for identification. Bills, mail, anything that tied a life to an address. Liana scrolled her phone and showed pictures. Ada asleep on their couch beneath the lilac print, still hanging on the wall inside. Delaney's partner approached the porch. The stamped folder hovered between belief and convenience. Delaney exhaled. "Ma'am, we can't decide validity here. If there's a dispute, it goes to court. For now, it's a civil matter." A murmur rippled through the suits. Curtains drew. Liana's reflection stared back at her. Dress creased from the funeral, hair pinned in a rush, grief pooling like water at her collarbone. "Where will we sleep?" Ada asked, jaw set the way Tarek's used to set when the car refused to start. "We'll figure it out," Liana said, though the words tasted like chalk. She rounded the side yard and stopped. Black plastic bags sprawled across the grass. One had split, and the quilt Tarek's mother had stitched for their wedding bled into the mud. A photo frame lay face down. When she turned it over, Tarek smiled up at her in uniform. The glass cracked across his cheek. Delaney's partner helped her lift the heavier bags into the trunk of the aging sedan. He kept his eyes from the porch where men stood in quiet ranks, hymnals against their ribs like small shields. "I'm sorry," he said, almost inaudible. By sunset, the curb was clean, the lawn immaculate, the flower beds tended by hands that had seized them. Liana drove 3 blocks and parked beneath a flickering streetlight. Ada slept with her cheek against the lamb's matted ear. The phone watched Liana's face for a long minute before she pressed record. "My name is Liana Arquette," she said, voice ragged from the day. "Today I tried to go home. The church says my husband donated our house. The police say it's a civil dispute. They changed the locks. We're sleeping in the car. I don't want money. I just want my child back in her bed." She lowered the camera to show the trash bags, the quilt, the cracked frame. "If anyone knows what to do, please." She posted the video before resolve could dissolve into exhaustion. The comments multiplied. Some were prayers, some were knives. One was a number for legal aid. Another came from a reporter who could smell bleach over blood. The clip leapt from a neighborhood page to a county forum, to a channel that fed on outrage like fire. What Liana didn't know breathed 60 miles away, where evening leaned through the blinds of an old dining room and laid stripes across a white beard and a black suit. Don Rinaldo Marchetti watched the video on a phone he never carried himself. He listened to the small break when Liana said the word bed. He paused the frame on the photograph in her hand. Tarek. 17 years earlier, a car rolled twice and caught light on winter gravel. A stranger crawled down into the ditch and dragged the man inside free before flames decided otherwise. The stranger refused a reward, a favor, even a name on paper. "Help someone else someday," he said, squinting like he could see the ledger Rinaldo would keep for life. Rinaldo set the phone on the table. "Where is the child now?" "Asleep in their car," his consigliere answered. Rinaldo stood. "Call everyone. Suits, cameras, not one raised voice." He glanced once at the frozen frame. At dawn. The street that had watched Liana cry would soon watch something else. Polished shoes aligning like iron filings under a magnet, hats tipped against the light, a white jacket floating in a sea of black, and behind them an older man who looked like winter wrapped in law. There would be no battering ram, no shouted threat, only presence, the kind that turned air into consequence. Ada shifted, and Liana tucked the lamb beneath her chin. She stared through the windshield toward the dark that had swallowed their windows. Tomorrow she would call the number the clinic sent. She would answer the reporter. She would return to the red door even if the key never turned. Justice was already moving toward her while she slept, carried on headlights and an oath made on a roadside years ago. When the engines stilled and the line formed, the neighborhood would learn what it meant when debt and honor intersected at a widow's yard. And before the sun rose fully over the eaves, the past would walk out of memory and ring her doorbell. It would start with a name spoken softly, travel by phone tree and midnight knocks, and end with Liana learning why Tarek's kindness had already written tomorrow's law quietly. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us keep these stories alive. And trust me, the best part is yet to come. Now, let's get back to it. The city was quiet at that hour, the kind of quiet that doesn't come from peace, but from authority. A quiet earned, a quiet held. The kind that had Rinaldo Marchetti's name written in it even when his name was never spoken aloud. On the 10th floor of an old riverfront building, a long dining table sat beneath a low chandelier. No voices, no music, no clatter, just the soft sound of breathing and the weight of expectation. Men in dark suits lined the walls, posture straight, hands behind their backs, eyes forward. They didn't guard the dawn. They witnessed him. Rinaldo sat at the head of the table, untouched espresso cooling beside his hand. He was still. Not in the way of statues or portraits, but in the way of oceans before storms. A white beard framed his jaw, but didn't soften him. Age had not thinned him. If anything, time had only sharpened whatever steel lived in his bones. His suit was tailored, black as a closing door, the tie knotted with the precision of a man who believed discipline was prayer. His consigliere, Arturo, approached with a phone in both hands, as though it were something that could break. He set it beside the espresso and stepped back. "It's a video," Arturo said quietly. "You'll want to see it." Rinaldo tapped the screen. Light flickered. The widow's face appeared. She spoke softly. She tried not to cry. She failed. And when she said bed, there was a fracture in her voice so small it was almost missable. Rinaldo didn't miss it. He didn't blink. He didn't shift. The only movement in him was internal, like locks turning in old doors. When the video ended, the room didn't breathe. Arturo cleared his throat. Her husband's name was Arquette. Rinaldo's voice was low. A statement, not a question. Arturo nodded, surprised only that the Don had spoken first. Yes, Tarek Arquette. He passed last week. The Don leaned back slowly, as though time itself had loosened its hold on him. He looked past the chandelier, past the ceiling, past the 10th floor, to something much farther away. The night had tasted like iron and smoke. A highway bent along a frozen embankment. Snow blurred the world into white and dark shapes. Rinaldo had been younger then, not a Don, not anything really, just a man running errands for men who made larger choices. The car had skidded on black ice, spun twice, kissed the guardrail, and gone over. Upside down, gasoline dripping in steady rhythm, he remembered thinking, "This is fair. This is how it ends." The door wouldn't open. The seatbelt locked. Fire climbed. Then a figure appeared in the smoke, jacket thrown off, hands bare. He shattered the side window with a tire iron, punched the belt until it frayed, dragged Rinaldo through broken glass and gravel. The fire followed them out of the car like something furious to be deprived of its meal. They rolled into the snow. Rinaldo gasped at air that cut like knives. The stranger was coughing hard enough to bend at the rib cage. "Why?" Rinaldo managed to say. The man wiped soot from his face with the back of his wrist, eyes watering from smoke, but steady. He looked like someone who had learned to live through storms without waiting for them to pass. "Because you were alive," the man said. "That's reason enough." Rinaldo tried to sit up. "I owe you." "No." The stranger shook his head. "You don't owe me." "Name," Rinaldo demanded, stubborn even then. "Tarek," the man answered. "Tarek Arquette." He stood slowly, breathing through his lungs like they pained him. "If you want to repay it," he paused, voice softer, not dramatic, not philosophical, just real. "Help someone else someday." The snowstorm swallowed him. Rinaldo never saw him again. But he remembered. Some debts are written in ink. Some are written in bone. This one was carved deeper. The memory dissolved, but the emotion did not. Rinaldo rested his fingertips lightly against the edge of the table. "Her name is Liana. The child is Ada." "Yes," Arturo replied. "She was forced into the street." "Yes. And the house is claimed by a church." "Yes, they have documents." "Forgery?" "Almost certainly." Rinaldo inhaled once, slow, deep, controlled, the kind of breath that tells a room to brace. "Arturo." "Yes, Don." "Call everyone." Arturo didn't question, but the men along the walls exchanged brief glances. Not fear, not confusion, recognition. This was not business. This was honor. Rinaldo stood. The men straightened as though pulled upward by strings tied to their collars. He fastened the single button of his suit jacket with deliberate calm. "Full black," he said. "No weapons displayed. No raised voices. We do not approach the church. We do not touch a gate. We stand, we witness, we record." "Yes, Don." "And the white suit?" one man asked quietly, already knowing the answer. "He will wear it," Rinaldo said, "because grief deserves someone to speak without speaking." The room shifted. Not physically, but in weight. In intention. Rinaldo walked toward the window. The city lights spilled across the river. The night held its breath. He spoke so softly, only Arturo heard. Today is that day. Phones vibrated in pockets. Headlights snapped awake across the city. Men left dinner tables, left warm beds, left unfinished games of cards. They didn't ask why. They didn't need to. Loyalty did not require explanation when loyalty had roots. From warehouses, from restaurants, from back rooms of barber shops and the top floors of glass buildings that pretended to be clean. They gathered. Black suits, polished shoes, hats, gloves, cameras, not one weapon visible. The power was not in what they could do. It was in what they would not need to do. By the time dawn brushed the edges of rooftops, 300 men moved as one, the way tide moves, inevitable and unhurried. Engines hummed, doors shut softly, synchronized like liturgy. They rolled through streets like history being corrected. And at the front, in a black sedan with windows down just enough to feel the morning air, sat Ronaldo, not triumphant, not angry, simply answering a debt that was never spoken aloud but had always been waiting for its hour. Liana and Ada were still sleeping when the first engine turned onto their street. They did not yet know that the world had shifted in their favor, that the quiet they woke into was not emptiness, but the kind that follows the drawing of swords no one will need to lift. They would know soon, very soon, because some promises don't fade, some debts don't die with the man who earned them, and some justice doesn't arrive in fists. It arrives in silence, in formation, in the kind of loyalty that changes the ending. Before we continue, take a moment to subscribe and like this video. It helps more people discover stories like this one. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now take a deep breath, because what happens next will change everything. The neighborhood woke to silence, not the ordinary kind, not morning bird or sprinkler hiss silence. This was the kind of silence people felt. A stillness that pressed softly against windows and settled under the skin like a question no one had the answer to yet. Dawn light spilled over the roofs of the houses, pale gold stretching across trimmed lawns and cracked driveways, and lining both sides of Oak Willow Lane were men, 300 of them, black suits, black ties, shoes reflecting the morning like mirrors. They stood shoulder to shoulder, expressionless, hands clasped before them or folded neatly behind their backs. They did not speak, they did not move, they did not need to. Their presence was louder than sirens. Curtains twitched open up and down the street. Neighbors whispered into coffee mugs. Someone took a picture and then stopped, realizing instinctively that cameras might break the reverence of whatever this was. In the middle of the formation, near the walkway that led up to the pale blue house with the white shutters and the flower beds planted by hands now gone, stood one man in a black suit tailored with precision no tailor alive would dare question. Silver hair, shoulders like carved stone, presence like an unsheathed blade resting calmly in its scabbard. Rinaldo Marchetti did not speak either. He didn't have to. The street spoke for him. Liana Arquette did not notice them at first. She had been driving with both hands clenched tight on the steering wheel, her daughter Ada asleep in the back seat with her head resting on a stuffed fox missing one button eye. She had told herself she was only going back to the house to pick up what little had been left behind. A few clothes, a photo of Tarek from their wedding, Ada's drawing of their family, 3 smiling stick figures holding hands in the front yard. But when she turned the corner, the road seemed to vanish under the gathering. Her foot eased off the gas. The car slowed to a crawl. "Mom?" Ada mumbled sleepily. "Why did we stop?" Liana couldn't answer. Her throat narrowed, words dissolving before they could form. The men did not turn toward her. They didn't need to. They had been waiting. As she pulled the car to the curb, one man stepped forward, the one in the white suit. Not flashy, not showy. White like snow that doesn't apologize for being blinding. He said nothing. He simply opened the back door of her car for Ada, like it was something he had always done. Ada blinked up at him. He bowed his head, solemn and gentle, neither threatening nor familiar, just respectful. Then Liana saw him. Rinaldo. His presence stilled her breath. She had seen powerful men before, men who believed themselves important. But this was different. This was power without bragging, strength without motion, a storm taught to remain still until the moment it chose not to be. He walked toward her. Slow. Nothing rushed. The world seemed to part for him. Ada clutched Liana's hand. Rinaldo stopped before them and lowered himself to one knee. Not before Liana, but before Ada. His voice when he spoke was quiet enough to require listening. "You're safe now," he said. Ada stared at him, tears welling because children recognize truth and danger faster than grown men ever do. She didn't know who he was. She didn't need to. She just nodded. Rinaldo stood. Liana's voice trembled. "Who are you?" He studied her for a moment, and the morning seemed to hold the answer before he spoke it. "I knew your husband." The world shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, just enough that something deep in her chest woke. "I don't understand," she whispered. "My husband saved my life." Rinaldo finished for her. "Years ago, on a road outside Coventry, a crash, fire. He pulled me out when death had already reached for me." Liana's breath caught. Tarek had mentioned that night only once, told her he had helped someone, and that was enough. He had never said a name, never said he had saved a man like this. Rinaldo's eyes softened, not with pity, but with something steadier. "He told me something," he said, "when I asked how I could repay him." Liana swallowed. "What did he say?" Rinaldo's voice was reverent, almost quiet prayer. He said, "If you want to repay it, help someone else someday." The words hung between them like a bridge built in a single breath. Liana's hand flew to her mouth. Her legs threatened to fold beneath her. "He never told me," she whispered. "No," Rinaldo said softly. "Good men don't speak loudly of the things they do." The morning light warmed the side of the house. Wind stirred the leaves. The silence of the formation behind Rinaldo was not empty. It was allegiance. Rinaldo gestured gently toward the lawn, toward her home, toward the life she had been pushed away from. "You are not alone now," he said. Liana's chest tightened and loosened all at once, as though she had been holding her breath for days, and only now remembered how to breathe. "But the church," she began, voice cracking around the word. "They will not be touched," Rinaldo said. "We are not here to threaten. We are here to witness." He turned slightly. The men behind him did not move. They didn't need to. "We will record everything," he said. "Every word spoken, every action taken, every truth and every lie, and the world will see." Liana looked at the sea of suits. Not one frayed cuff, not one crooked seam, not one expression twisted with anger. No fists, no weapons, only resolve. Ada tugged Liana's sleeve again, her voice tiny. "Can we go home now, Mama?" For the first time since the burial, since the door that would not open, since the mud on her daughter's toys and the cold of sleeping in the car, the answer was not impossible. "Yes," Liana whispered, tears falling freely. "Yes, baby." "We're going home." Ronaldo offered his arm, not to lead her, but to walk beside her. As they stepped toward the house, the line of men shifted, not breaking formation, but opening like doors being held for royalty. The street did not cheer. It did not applaud. It simply watched. Because some victories are not loud. Some salvation arrives without weapons drawn. Some justice does not shout. It stands, and the neighborhood understood. The cavalry had come. Pastor Abram Keller arrived with the sound of hurried footsteps and rattling anger disguised as righteousness. He came flanked by 4 senior church members, all in pressed suits that tried to mirror dignity, but wavered under the weight of something hollow. Their Bibles were clutched like weapons. Their eyes flicked nervously towards the silent line of black suits standing sentinel along the street. The contrast was immediate and powerful. The churchmen fidgeted. Ronaldo's men did not blink. Liana stood beside Ronaldo, Ada holding her hand. The morning air held the quiet tension of something inevitable. Pastor Keller stopped a few steps away, chest puffed, voice raised before anyone had spoken to him. "This is harassment," he declared, loud enough for neighbors behind curtains to hear. "This is unlawful intimidation. You are trespassing and disrupting a peaceful religious community." No one moved in the line of suits. Not a single head turned. Silence had never looked so sharp. Ronaldo did not raise his voice. He did not step forward. He simply turned his head slightly to acknowledge the pastor, as if acknowledging the arrival of a breeze. "We are witnesses," he said, his tone even, almost gentle. "Not aggressors." The pastor scoffed. "Witnesses? You come with an army. You line our streets like soldiers. You are threatening this woman's church family." Liana felt her stomach twist. Church family. The same people who threw her child's belongings into the yard, who stood on her porch and smiled when she cried, who told her the house was never really hers. Ada's fingers tightened around her mother's. Ronaldo's gaze shifted to Liana for a moment, reading her without words, then returned to the pastor. "If your conscience is clear," he said, "our presence should only trouble you as much as the truth does." The church elders murmured among themselves, shaken but unwilling to show it. Pastor Keller pushed on, his confidence turning brittle. "This house was given to the church." Liana is confused. Grief-stricken. "We are acting in her best interest. The property deed clearly is forged," Ronaldo finished quietly. The word landed like a slow bell toll. Keller blinked. "Excuse me?" Ronaldo nodded once to the man in the white suit. In response, 3 men stepped forward from the formation, not quickly, not with flourish, simply removing phones, cameras, and small recording devices. They began taking photos. The house exterior, the locks, the trash bags still in the side yard, the cracked toy fox in Ada's hand. Another group of men spoke softly with neighbors. Calm voices, open postures. No threats, only questions. Some neighbors stepped forward eagerly. Some looked away with guilt. Some cried. Pastor Keller stiffened, something rattling behind his composed expression. This is coercion. You're manipulating public perception." Ronaldo met his gaze with the steady certainty of someone who had lived too long to waste breaths on anger. "Perception does not require manipulation," he said. "Only light." A whisper rippled from one of the nearby houses. Then another. And another. Someone opened their door and stepped outside. Then someone else. Then more. Residents stood on porches, on lawns, on sidewalks, drawn not just by the spectacle, but by relief that someone, finally, was refusing to look away. Phones lifted, screens began recording, Uploads began. Pastor Keller saw it happen and panicked, though his voice tried to stay righteous. "You are interfering in sacred church business. This is a private matter." "No," Ronaldo replied. "You made it public when you removed her from her home." The tension tightened, but Ronaldo's men did not shift. No threat, no aggression, only stillness that felt like stone. One of the elders stepped forward, his voice wobbling between fear and performative indignation. "She is lying! Her husband wanted the church to have this home." "Liar!" came a voice from across the street. Everyone turned. Mrs. Vance, who had lived 2 houses down for 36 years, stood on her porch with her arms crossed, grief and fury shaking in her voice. "I was there when Tarek fixed your church's furnace for free because you said you couldn't afford the repairs." She pointed at Keller, her hand trembling. "He told me that day the church always takes and never gives." The pastor blanched. More neighbors spoke up. "He shoveled my driveway for years, for nothing. He paid for my son's cleats when our power got shut off. He stopped to pray with my mother when she was dying. Your church never visited her once." And with every testimony, every memory, every small act of quiet kindness spoken aloud, Liana felt Tarek return. Not in body, but in truth. Pastor Keller tried to regain the narrative. "These are emotional exaggerations. None of this justifies." One of Ronaldo's men interrupted. Not with words, but with action. He held up a phone displaying a live social feed. The scene was already online. Views climbing, comments flooding, sympathy rising. Keller's voice faltered as he saw headlines already forming. "Widow evicted after husband's death. Church accused of home fraud. 300 men stand silently as community demands answers." The pastor's voice cracked. "This isn't how things are done." Ronaldo finally stepped forward, only one step. But it felt like the earth moved to make space for him. His voice did not rise. "This is how things are done," he said, "when the law forgets its heart." Silence spread outward again, covering the street like a tide. Church members shifted in discomfort. Neighbors watched with held breath. Ada leaned into Liana's side, small fingers curled safety tight. A news van appeared at the end of the street. Then another. The church elders froze. Pastor Keller swallowed, throat bobbing. He knew what public scrutiny meant, what investigations meant, what truth meant. Ronaldo's men did not cheer, did not smirk, did not move. The moment did not require victory. It simply required presence. Liana watched it happen, not like someone watching a battle won, but like someone watching a burden lifted one grain of weight at a time. Discipline was louder than fury, stillness more devastating than force. Ronaldo turned his head to her, voice meant only for her ears. "This ends in the light," he said, "not the dark they tried to bury you in." And Liana realized something quietly, fully. The church had faith in fear. This man, these men, had faith in justice. The difference was everything. It began with whispers, the kind meant to poison quietly, softly, under the guise of concern. Pastor Keller's voice carried through the neighborhood like smoke. He didn't shout, he didn't rant, he performed. A man accustomed to pulpits and eyes fixed on him, he knew how to lace manipulation with warmth, how to make cruelty sound like compassion. He walked from yard to yard with his senior members in tow, speaking to neighbors in low tones, just loud enough to be overheard. Liana is grieving. She's confused. She's unstable right now. She's been struggling financially for years. Tarek knew the house would go to better use under the church. Yes, we tried to help her. We wanted to guide her, but she refuses spiritual counsel. And these men? They are criminals, dangerous outsiders manipulating a fragile widow. Every sentence had a hook of pity and a dagger of accusation hidden just beneath. The churchwomen joined in too, hands pressed to their chests like they were heartbroken by the burden of having to say such things. She left her daughter crying just to chase conflict. She's refusing to honor her husband's wishes. She's being misled by men like them. Always the same pattern. They tried to steal her voice by rewriting her story. It should have worked. Once upon a time, it would have worked. But something had changed. The quiet men in black suits remained exactly as they were, aligned, disciplined, unshakable. They did not shout back. They did not argue. They did not defend themselves. Their silence exposed the church's noise. Rinaldo stood at the edge of the lawn, arms clasped behind his back, watching Keller move like a man certain his words were enough to tilt the world in his direction. "He expects us to engage," Liana whispered, voice tight. "To fight his words with anger." Rinaldo didn't look at Keller. His eyes stayed forward. "That is how men like him win," he said. "They need conflict to justify their deceit. If we speak, we feed him. If we fight, we validate him." Liana swallowed hard. "So what do we do?" "Nothing," Rinaldo said. "We stand." And so they did. Not a single man responded as the insults sharpened, as the pastor's tone grew more theatrical, more wounded, more self-righteous. The church wanted spectacle. They wanted outrage. What they received was calm. Cameras continued to record everything. Neighbors watched everything. Social feeds pulsed like a heartbeat. The neighborhood didn't see criminals. They saw restraint. They didn't see intimidation. They saw protection. And slowly, then rapidly, the narrative shifted. First came Mrs. Vance again, who spoke to a local reporter with her full name and face uncovered. "That man," she said, pointing at Keller's house, "told me last year that widows are a resource for the church community. He talked about them like they were property, like they were harvest." Her voice quivered, but her eyes didn't. "And now he's taken one's home. Do you need anything else to understand?" The reporter, sensing fire, turned to the camera. "Sir, is that true? Do you have a response?" Keller smiled the way men do when they forget which lies they've told where. "That statement has been taken entirely out of context. We simply—" A second neighbor cut him off, this time Mr. Rodriguez from across the street, a quiet man who rarely spoke to anyone. He stepped out onto his driveway with a printed email in hand. "This is your signature on an email asking me to prayerfully consider donating my late wife's property to the church, isn't it?" Keller froze. The church's illusion cracked, not with noise, but with truth. More neighbors came forward. Memories resurfaced. Patterns emerged. The camera crews didn't have to search for interviews. The neighborhood lined up to speak. Liana didn't speak at all, not yet. She just stood, Ada holding her hand, silent tears moving down her face, no longer from despair, but from witnessing. The harder the church pushed, the more they exposed themselves. Keller, now desperate, tried to reclaim control the way frightened men do. Loudly. He stepped forward, raising his voice for the entire block to hear. "This is spiritual warfare. This woman is being manipulated by criminal forces. We are trying to save her, and she is rejecting salvation." Rinaldo finally looked at him. Not with rage, but with the quiet disappointment of someone who has seen too much of the world to be fooled anymore. "She never needed you to save her," Rinaldo said, "only to leave her with what was hers." Keller's face reddened. "You think you understand God?" Rinaldo's voice was soft. I understand debt. I understand devotion. I understand honor. That is more than I can say for you. A murmur rolled through the street. Not approval. Recognition. Keller's final card was emotional manipulation, aimed directly at Liana. He turned to her, eyes glossy with rehearsed sorrow. Liana, listen to me. You are lost. Without your husband, without guidance, without the church's love, you have nowhere to stand. We are your family. We have always been. Don't let grief turn you away from God. Ada flinched. Liana's hands shook. Rinaldo did not touch her, but he stood just close enough that his presence steadied the air. Liana lifted her head. Her voice was not loud, not trained, not theatrical, but it was true. I stood by your side every Sunday after Tarek died, and not one of you asked if I had enough to eat. Not one of you drove me to the cemetery. Not one of you came to check on Ada when she cried herself to sleep asking for her father. Her breath trembled. You did not love us. You loved what you could take from us. Keller's face faltered, only for a second, but the camera saw it. Everyone saw it. The war of shame had ended, not with a scream, but with clarity. The pastor opened his mouth to respond, but this time no one listened. Neighbors turned away from him. Reporters turned toward Liana, and Rinaldo's men did not speak. They did not have to. The truth was finally louder than the lies, and the church, cloaked for years in the performance of holiness, now stood in daylight, exposed for what it had become. The courthouse smelled like old paper and cold air, the kind that settles in your bones and makes every sound sharper. Liana sat at the long wooden table beside her attorney, her hands clasped together so tightly her knuckles were white. Ada sat behind them with Mrs. Vance, legs dangling off the bench, clutching the repaired stuffed fox in her arms. Across the aisle sat Pastor Keller and 3 senior church members, their lawyer whispering urgently, flipping pages, tapping screens. They looked smaller here. Not holy, not righteous, just ordinary men trying to hold together something that was already falling apart. Rinaldo did not sit. He stood in the back of the courtroom with 30 of his men, lined shoulder to shoulder. Not blocking, not looming, just present. A quiet wall of support. The judge entered, a woman in her 60s with a posture that suggested she'd spent decades distinguishing truth from performance. She didn't waste time. This emergency hearing is in response to the matter of property at 14 Oak Willow Lane, she said, voice firm. We will review ownership, documentation, and any allegations of coercion or fraud. I will not tolerate theatrics, only evidence. Her gaze swept the room. It lingered on Pastor Keller for one fraction of a second longer than neutral. Liana's attorney, Miss Hale, stood. Your Honor, we present the original deed held by the Arquette family for over 20 years, signed and filed legally and uncontested. We also present mortgage records, tax documentation, and utility bills under Ms. Arquette's name up to the week of her husband's death. She displayed the folders, neat and precise. The judge nodded. Then Hale lifted a second stack, heavier, darker. And now, the documents the church has provided to justify their occupation of the property. She slid the forged deed forward. The judge examined it. Silence stretched. Her brow creased. This signature, she said, tapping it, does not match Mr. Arquette's verified signature on any legal record. She tapped the notary stamp. This stamp belongs to a notary who surrendered their license 6 months before this document was dated. Pastor Keller shifted in his seat. And the witness listed, the judge continued, is deceased. Has been deceased for 3 years. The church attorney cleared his throat. Your Honor, we believe Ms. Arquette is exploiting public sympathy. The document is legitimate, and the church acted in good faith. Good faith? The judge's voice didn't rise, but the air tightened. Are you suggesting this court should overlook a clearly fraudulent, improperly notarized, retroactively altered property transfer? The attorney opened his mouth again, then closed it. The judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, we have bank statements, she said, lifting another sheet, showing funds transferred from the church's outreach account into a personal account belonging to Mr. Abram Keller. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Keller went still. Amounts totaling over $78,000 over 2 years, the judge continued, labeled as pastoral housing assistance, though the church owns no such housing properties. Keller's lawyer leaned in and whispered fiercely. Keller's jaw clenched, but his face stayed composed, practiced neutrality cracking only at the edges. Hale stepped forward again. Your Honor, in addition to forged documents and misappropriated funds, Miss Arquette and her daughter were forcibly removed from their home without due process. Their belongings were discarded, their safety and stability compromised. The judge looked at Liana for the first time. Would you like to speak? Liana hadn't planned to. Her throat tightened, her hands trembled, but Ada looked at her. And Rinaldo, from across the room, met her eyes and nodded once. Liana stood. When my husband died, she began softly, I thought the world couldn't break me any further. Her voice shook. But then I came home, and they told me my home wasn't mine anymore. They said my husband chose them over me. They took my daughter's toys, her bed, the place where she learned to walk. They told me I was confused, that I should be grateful. Tears blurred her vision. I just want my child to have her home back. The courtroom was very, very quiet. The judge closed the folder. Her decision was immediate. This court finds the property at 14 Oak Willow Lane legally belongs to Ms. Liana Arquette, effective immediately. The air left Liana's lungs all at once. The judge wasn't done. The court further orders an expedited fraud investigation regarding the filed transfer documents. Mr. Abram Keller and associated leadership are hereby subjected to inquiry and potential criminal charges, including fraud, misappropriation of funds, and unlawful eviction. Pastor Keller's face collapsed inward, like someone had cut the frame holding him upright. And finally, the judge said, voice steady, Ms. Arquette is awarded temporary restitution damages of $15,000 to address immediate recovery needs, to be revisited at the conclusion of the investigation. The gavel fell. The sound was final, like a locked door opening. Liana's knees nearly gave out. Rinaldo moved to her silently, placing a hand on her shoulder, steady, warm, anchoring her to the moment. You stood, he said quietly. That was enough. Liana sobbed then, not in grief, not in fear, but in release. Ada wrapped her arms around her mother, burying her face in her coat. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. But the cameras didn't matter. The truth had already landed. The house was hers. Justice had finally found its voice. And Rinaldo, the man her husband once saved, had made sure she lived to hear it. The moving truck sat crooked in the driveway, as if even it didn't want to be there. The sky was gray, not storm gray, but the muted gray of a day that refused to pretend anything was normal. The neighborhood was quiet, no cars starting, no lawn mowers humming, no birds even. As if the world itself had stepped back to give space to the moment. Pastor Keller and the senior church members were already at the house when Liana's car pulled up. Boxes lay scattered on the lawn, hastily packed, sloppily taped, objects still visible where cardboard didn't quite meet. The house that had once felt sturdy now looked wounded. Rinaldo stood beneath the old maple tree by the curb, hands joined behind his back. Around him, like the shadows of a cathedral, stood the 300 men. Every suit, every polished shoe, every still expression formed a border around the property, not trapping, not threatening, bearing witness. They did not speak. Not one of them. Silence was a language today, and it spoke clearly. We are here. We see. We remember. A sheriff's deputy stood on the property line holding the court order. His expression was flat with an undercurrent of quiet satisfaction, the kind that only appears when right is finally being done. "Pastor Keller," the deputy said, "you and your members have until 3 p.m. to vacate. Any personal belongings left after that time will be legally surrendered." Keller nodded once, jaw so tight it might have cracked. He looked smaller today. Not physically, his frame was the same, but something inside him had deflated. The crown he had carved for himself had slipped. His authority had become costume. He lifted a box and began to walk it to the truck. No one stopped him. No one helped him. The other church members worked alongside him in stiff, jerking motions, packing clothes, chairs, cooking pots, framed Bible verses with gold trim. Ita, the choir director, wiped mascara streaks from under her eyes. Senior Deacon Morris walked as though the air itself had gained weight. Liana stood beside her daughter, watching. Ada held her stuffed fox close, the one that had been torn and mended. She didn't hide behind her mother's leg. She watched openly, her gaze steady and bright with the moral clarity only children have. Keller lifted another box, but the weight of eyes, not hostile, not hateful, just there, made his hands shake. He turned sharply toward the silent formation. "You think this is justice?" he snapped. "You think humiliating us makes you righteous?" No one answered. The silence was devotional. Keller lifted his chin, voice rising in anger to mask fear. "We are God's people. We were doing His work. This was His will." Still no one spoke. Rinaldo did not move. The deputy didn't either. Finally, Keller turned to Liana, desperation flickering under his anger. "You'll regret this," he hissed, "when the world forgets about you. When these men leave, when your grief returns, you'll come crawling back." Liana did not flinch. She didn't glare. She didn't spit words back. She simply looked at him. Calm, steady, clear. "My husband saved a life," she said softly, "and that life saved ours. You didn't lose a battle here. You lost the mask you hid behind." The words landed like a door closing. Quiet, firm, final. Keller's breathing hitched. For 1 second, just one, his face showed the truth beneath all the posture. He knew he had been seen, and there is no humiliation deeper than being seen clearly when the truth is ugly. He turned back to the boxes. The church members worked faster now, not speaking, not looking at each other. The camera crews filmed everything, but they did not swarm or chase. They simply recorded. The truth didn't need commentary. Neighbors watched from porches. Not triumphant, not gloating. Simply present. This was not revenge. This was accountability. When the final box was placed in the truck and the final bag thrown into the back seat of Keller's sedan, the deputy checked his watch. "Time's up." Keller stood in front of the house one last time. Not to say goodbye, but because something in him didn't know how to leave power he no longer had. He looked at the house like it had betrayed him. Then he walked to his car. The door shut with a dull thud. He did not look at Liana again. The convoy of disgraced leaders rolled slowly down the street, engines quiet, tires crunching over fallen leaves. The church banner that once proclaimed faith, family, fellowship was folded badly on the dashboard, the words bent and crushed. And the 300 men watched. No applause, no shouts, no satisfaction spoken aloud. The humiliation was not in mockery. It was in the absence of it. They were not worth the noise. When the last car disappeared around the corner, Ronaldo finally exhaled and stepped forward. The line of men parted. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. He simply looked at Liana with the respect of one survivor recognizing another. "It is yours," he said. "Now and always." Liana's tears came silently, not from pain this time, but from release. She knelt on the walkway, Ada running into her arms. The house stood behind them, battered but waiting. Their home, and all around them. 300 men stood guard over the moment, as if safeguarding not just a property, but a restoration of dignity itself. Justice didn't roar today. It bowed its head in quiet triumph. They entered the house slowly, as if stepping into something sacred, something wounded. The air inside was stale, heavy with dust and something else, something like neglect, but edged with contempt. The smell of furniture overturned, paper left damp, food left to rot in the sink. Ada clung to Liana's hand at first, her small fingers cold and tense. The living room looked as though it had weathered a storm. Cushions were slashed. Picture frames lay shattered across the floor. The place where Tarek's chair had sat, his quiet corner, was empty, scraped bare. The walls held smudges and scratches where religious banners had once been hung. No one spoke, not because words were inappropriate, but because they were unnecessary. Ronaldo stepped forward first. He took off his jacket and folded it carefully over the arm of a chair that was still upright. He rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms lined with scars. Not the kind from violence, but from work. Work done when the world was heavier than men were meant to lift. Then he began picking up broken wood and setting it aside for repair. The men behind him followed. Not with hesitation, but with purpose. Some kneeled on the carpet, gathering glass. Some righted furniture. Some tested outlets and light fixtures. Some swept. Some measured windows. Some scrubbed walls. No orders, no barking, no hierarchy, just motion. Quiet, coordinated, steady. As though they had done this before. Not as soldiers or criminals or legends, but as sons of broken homes who once wished someone had done the same for them. Ada wandered in small steps, still cautious. Her eyes searched for something familiar, to prove to her that this place was still hers. The house answered slowly. A blanket here, a bookshelf there. Her height marks on the doorframe, her name carved faintly into a drawer knob. She let go of her mother's hand. Ronaldo noticed, but pretended not to. Liana moved room to room behind the men, hands hovering at her chest as if holding her heart together. She did not cry immediately. She was beyond that, too exhausted even for grief. The house was hers, but the memory of violation was still fresh, pulsing under her skin. One of the men, broad-shouldered, dark hair tied back, approached gently, holding something small and soft. Ada's fox. The seam down its side was torn. One button eye dangled. Its fur was grayed from dirt, but it was unmistakable. Ada gasped. The sound was a single sharp breath, a sound of recognition. She ran and took it from him, clutching it to her chest like a heartbeat she'd thought had stopped. The man knelt. "May I?" he asked. Ada hesitated, then nodded, handing him the fox. He pulled a small sewing kit from his coat pocket. Not because he had anticipated this, but because some men carry quiet skills the world doesn't expect of them. He sat cross-legged on the floor and began to mend, stitch by careful stitch. Tiny movements, steady hands, thread pulled neat and close. Ada sat beside him, watching every motion, as though this moment itself were magic. And in a way, it was. Upstairs, another man scrubbed a drawing off the wall, something cruel that had been scrawled there. He replaced it with fresh paint. Another set new screws into a loose banister. Another tightened hinges. Another washed the windows until they shined again. Outside, others worked the garden, pulling weeds, righting toppled planters, gently coaxing life from soil that had not been cared for. They moved like water, all flow, no force. Liana finally reached the kitchen doorway and stopped. The stove was overturned. A plate Liana and Tarek had bought at a flea market was cracked on the counter. The window above the sink was smeared with something muddy. She pressed her hand over her mouth. Not to stifle tears. Those hadn't come yet. But to brace herself. To stay upright. To not crumble under the weight of memory and loss and relief all tangled together. Ronaldo came to stand beside her, not touching her, not intruding, just present. "Some things we can't restore exactly as they were," he said quietly. "But we can make them whole again." Liana's throat tightened. "Tarek used to fix that cabinet hinge," she murmured. "Every time it loosened. He'd say, 'A home isn't walls, it's how we tend it.'" Ronaldo nodded. "And now others will tend it for him." The tears came then, soft, not desperate, not broken. Grief, yes, but also gratitude. And something like peace. Ada's laughter broke the silence upstairs. Real laughter, not strained, not forced. Sharp and bright and alive. Liana closed her eyes. Then she followed the sound. Upstairs, Ada ran across her bedroom floor, her footsteps soft against newly vacuumed carpet. Her stuffed fox was whole again, stitched, brushed, clean. She held it high above her head as she twirled. The man who fixed it smiled faintly from where he sat on the rug, hands folded like he was protecting a secret he would never speak aloud. And Liana, she just stood in the doorway, watching. Her daughter, in her room, laughing. The sound hit her chest like a sunrise breaking. Home. Home was returning. She crossed the room and sat on the floor, gathering Ada in her arms. The fox was pressed between them. Ada smelled of dust and hope and childhood. Ronaldo watched from the hallway, his expression unreadable, but softened. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. No one in the house spoke for a long time. The work continued, hammers clicking, brooms sweeping, paint rolling, wood shifting, soil turning, all of it steady, all of it gentle. Love delivered not through speeches, promises, or rehearsed displays, but through hands, through labor, through presence, through the simplest and rarest of things, care. Liana lowered her forehead to Ada's hair, whispering, "We're home, baby," and for the first time since Tarek's funeral. She believed it. The morning was quiet. Not the tense, held-breath silence of the past days, but the kind that comes after a storm, the kind that feels like the earth itself is exhaling. The house no longer looked wounded. Fresh paint gleamed softly in the early light. The garden had color again. Windows shone clear. And the front door, once chipped, once scratched, once slammed by hands that didn't belong there, now stood steady, polished, whole. Ronaldo stood before it, holding a small brass plaque. Its surface caught the sunrise and turned it gold. Liana watched from the walkway, Ada beside her, her newly mended fox in her arms. They said nothing. They didn't need to. Ronaldo raised the plaque and set it gently against the wall, just above the doorframe. One of the men handed him a drill. The sound was quiet, just a soft hum, not a harsh one. When he stepped back, the plaque shone clearly. Tarek Arquette, a good man. This home stands in his honor. It wasn't elaborate. It didn't need to be. It was truth, carved in metal. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Liana stepped forward. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't tremble. She did not stumble through a speech or try to fill the air with gratitude that language isn't big enough to hold. She just placed her hand over her heart, looked up at him, and nodded. Ronaldo returned the nod. Slow, deliberate, the acknowledgement of equals, not of savior and saved. He did not tell her to stay strong. He did not remind her of resilience. He did not offer a promise of future protection. The plaque itself was the promise. Legacy, connection, memory made permanent. Ada walked forward, stepping between them. She reached up and touched the plaque with her small hand, as though blessing it. "It's Daddy's house," she whispered, almost to herself. "Yes," Liana said softly. "Always." The men began to gather, not marching, not saluting, not performing, just preparing to leave as quietly as they came. Ronaldo turned to his men and gave a single nod. The formation shifted as one, smooth as water flowing around a stone. They moved down the street, polished shoes tapping softly against pavement, an unbroken rhythm of presence and departure. No engines roared, no orders were shouted. Silence remained their language. Neighbors stepped onto porches, onto lawns, into driveways. Some held coffee cups. Some held cameras lowered at their sides, forgotten. Some held hands with loved ones, needing to feel something grounded. But every face shared the same expression. Respect, because they had seen what most people only hear stories about. Justice that didn't require fists, loyalty that didn't need boasting, strength that didn't need to prove itself by crushing anything. Ronaldo paused at the curb. He looked back at the house one last time. Not to admire his work, not to savor victory, but to honor a memory. Tarek Arquette, a good man. "Your husband saved my life," he said quietly. "I repay that debt by protecting what he loved." "That is all." Liana nodded again, and this time the tears finally came. Not the tears of fear or loss or exhaustion, but of completion, of something ending the way it should have from the beginning. She did not bow. She did not cling. She simply let the tears fall and let him see them. Ronaldo inclined his head, an unspoken farewell, then joined the line as it continued to move. The men walked away in silence, 300 dark suits stretching down the street like a procession of memory, dignity, and closure. No one spoke until the last of them turned the corner. The world felt different. The air felt lighter. Ada tugged her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, can we go inside now?" Liana smiled. A real one. Small, soft, but real. She lifted Ada into her arms, just for a moment, just to feel the weight of her child held safely where she belonged. Ada's little hands wrapped around her neck. The fox squished between them, warm, familiar. Liana turned toward the house. Their house. The plaque gleamed above the door, catching sunlight like a signal flare. "This place is claimed. This place is protected. This place is loved." She carried Ada across the threshold, pausing just long enough to whisper, not to the walls, but to the memory that lived within them. We're home. And this time, the house felt it. If this story has your attention, hit that subscribe button and let us know where in the world you're watching from. Every story we tell connects the past to the present, and we'd love to have you with us for the next one.